We're not looking as you run in gold. Do you know, when I was thinking about the theme for Pastors' Wives, it's always, what do we call it? What are we going to do? What does the Lord want to do? I kept hitting the Psalms. I do it all the time. It's a place where the Lord comforts and encourages and strengthens and builds us up. And so I just thought how many times the Lord whispers in our ear, of the encouragement and the strength and the exhortation that we need. And so we're going to be all in different Psalms today, all different places. You don't know where. I think Mary Stevens didn't know where either. She had a plan and the Lord gave her a new one. So, but we have Naghmeh Abedini and Andrea Yim and Mary Stevens here, and I think you're familiar with lots of their stories. I know that you know Naghmeh and Saeed's story and how the Lord has strengthened and empowered them to take every step, every single day, and how Naghmeh has been an advocate for her husband, but an amazing, mighty witness for Jesus. And so we're excited to have her here today. So welcome, Naghmeh Abedini.
Good morning. Well, as I was sitting there worshiping, Mary asked me if I was nervous, and I said yes. It just doesn't go away. I thought maybe after speaking a few times, I'd feel like I got this, but it's good because it keeps me completely dependent on the Lord, and just by His grace, I'm even standing up most days. It's just I wake up, especially when I travel, it's hard. I wake up in a hotel room and I realize, wow, this has become my life. It's just my husband's in an Iranian prison suffering for Christ, and my kids are in Boise, and it's just been our whole family. My kids have had to, in a way, lose a mom and a dad. Because of my travels and advocating for Saeed, and for me, I felt like, when something happens like this, you want to just hold to your babies and just this is my normal, me and my flesh. I just want to just hold my babies and just close the door and just wait for it to be over with, the nightmare. But the Lord had different plans, and that's what I want to talk about today. I want to start with Psalm 2 because it's the beginning of the psalm, but it tells a lot of my story because I was born in Iran, and I grew up in war. Where I was growing up, there was just Iran and Iraq had an 8-year war, and about 1 million people died. And just where I grew up, you could hear the airplanes. The sirens would go off when we go to the basement, and you could hear Iraqi airplanes coming and bombing or missiles going off, and you'd wonder if your house was going to be next. And we'd wake up going to school and seeing houses that were destroyed and our friends that were killed. And so that's what I kind of grew up with. And I've talked about, especially next session, the last session when I speak, I want to talk more about that. But fear, I think my fear maybe started there. I've always struggled with fear and anxiety, and over the last couple of years, I've thought about that. Maybe it started with just growing up in a war and not knowing if tomorrow I was going to wake up alive, or my parents were going to die, or what was going to happen, not really knowing. And so since I was a child, there was a lot of fear that I struggled with. And we ended up coming to the United States, and I remember when my twin brother and I, at night, we would look at each other and wonder who is God and where is God and why is all of this stuff happening in Iran. And then when we came to the States, one day my brother came running to me and he said, Naghmeh, I found the God we've been looking for. His name is Jesus. And he'd had a vision of Jesus, and he told me, and we found people who told us about Jesus and led us to Christ. And we were asking, who's this Jesus? And we were given a Bible, but it was a Farsi Bible. Where we were at in California, there was a lot of Iranians, and we were able to find people that we already knew that gave us a Farsi Bible. And since we didn't know any English at that time, we were 9. And It was a Psalm New Testament. And the reason I'm starting with Psalm 2, because that's how far I got before my Bible was taken away. And so I start reading the Psalm, and what stuck out to me most before my parents found out we were Christians and took the Bible away was Psalm 2:7. I'm going to talk about Psalm 2, but I want to focus on this area. It says, I will declare the decree that the Lord has said to me, you are my son or daughter. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance and the ends of the earth for your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. Of course, it talks about Jesus, but also us. I remember reading this and thinking, wow, I'm like a daughter of God, and I have an inheritance. Wow. Because in my culture, in the Middle East culture, inheritance is a big deal. And so I remember just hadn't become a Christian and realizing I get an inheritance as a child of God. What is it? Like, I want to know, what is it? And it says, ask of me, and I will give you the nations. And so it's for years and years, I prayed this, not realizing that in the last couple years, I've stood before nations and before governments and been able to share the gospel to millions and millions of people. And I'm going to go into more of that. But as a child, I remember I was reading that, and my Bible was taken from me. And then so this stuck to me, that I'm a child of God, I have an inheritance, and I'm going to ask God. I'm going to ask God for it because God says I can. And I'm going to ask for the nations. And I didn't know what I was asking for, but I prayed it for a long time. And I actually, probably around the time I got married and had kids, life got crazy and I forgot about it. But for most of my life, I was praying about it. And recently, I remember, I don't know even when it was, in the last couple of years, I was sitting in front of the United Nations. I had the head of the United Nations, the president in front of me, and I had all these countries around me, over 100 countries. And I remember as I was sharing about Christ, and I had, on the balcony, it was a glass window, and there was all these translators translating, and all these countries were listening in their own, in their ear, in their own language. There was like a channel you could bring it to. And so all these ambassadors and government officials were hearing as I was sharing about Jesus in front of the United Nations in Geneva. And I remember at that time the Lord saying, remember that prayer you prayed for so long? Ask of me and I will give you the nations. I had over 100 countries hearing in their own language as I shared about Jesus Christ for free. I didn't have to pay my way. I was invited. At my lowest point, where I have already struggled with so much fear and anxiety as a single mom, not knowing what my future held, not even knowing the first week, I didn't even know if Saeed was alive. I remember calling his phone so much and realizing that he's not going to answer, and is just crying and being like, this is how it feels like to lose a loved one. You want to hear their voice one more time, and it wasn't happening. So it took me weeks before I stopped calling his number and realizing it's me, single mom. Like, if Rebecca did something, or my son Jacob, I wanted to call him and be like, what do you think about this? And then I realized, I'm on my own. I'm a single mom. I can't process it with my husband. And for someone who deals with fear, anxiety, to be at the lowest point as a single mom with no money, nothing, no connections, to be taken before nations, that just shows the beauty of our God. And to be taken in front of the United Nations and the parliaments, European Parliament and Dutch Parliament and this and our Congress. And recently I want to talk about that, meeting the president of the United States and just all the things, all the places God has taken me before government officials and presidents and ambassadors. I can't even number how many countries I've met, and ambassadors and government officials and parliament leaders. And in a few months, I'll be going again before the European Parliament and the German Parliament. And then a few months after that, I'll be speaking at an event in Rome where the University of Berkeley and Notre Dame and all these universities have sponsored me to go to speak about religious freedom. And I'm just like, wow, it's just an amazing open door that the Lord has you can see God's hands in all of it. But today as I was, and I'm not, this is interesting, I don't write things out because I hate speech class. I hated speech class. I hated writing things out. And I'm like, Lord, this is what I'm doing the last 2 years. A couple of weeks ago, I was at CPAC. It's very political. There's all the Republican presidential candidates. And I'm like, that was the first time I was so nervous. I wrote something out and I couldn't read it. I was so nervous. I was like, I looked at it and I went blank. So I was like, okay, I'm not writing anything down. But it's my rebellion against God, I guess, by not writing something down, because I'm like, I'm not doing speech. I'm just gonna, it's just, I would rather flunk in high school and college in speech than speak in front of people. So I just hated the whole like introduction and this. And so it's interesting how at my weakest point, the Lord just takes me before, has me speak before people and a lot of different venues. A lot of them are non-Christian, like the parliaments, and now it's political. It's become more political. I'll be speaking at the Value Voter Summit again. It's going to be Phil Robertson of Duck Dynasty and like the Duckers and me, and then it's going to be all the presidential candidates. And they're great speakers. They're great speakers. And I'm like, why am I being invited to speak? Like, I'm not a great speaker. But I think the beauty of the reason I like doing it is because I like for people to see that I'm just one of you. I haven't been trained. I didn't get a doctor in Harvard like Ted Cruz did. Or he's going to be one of the speakers, and or whoever, all the credentials. I didn't have any of them. I don't have any of them. But God, the beauty of our God is that, and this is what I want to get back to the psalm, and what I felt the Lord's telling me is, tell my people, come to me and ask of me. And so many times we forget to ask God. We worry about this. The verses before leading up to this, there's the nations that are planning and plotting, and they're doing this, and there's drama in your life, and there's waves, and there's storms, and all this stuff is happening. And what does God say? It's just like, just ask of me. It says first, God who sits in heaven laughs, he mocks them. He speaks to them in wrath, disciplines them. But he says, what? I have my king and I have my location. I'm in control. It says in verse 6, yet I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion. He has his God is not bothered by all these plans and drama in life that we get bothered with. We look at it and we fall. We're like, oh, this person, or this person's doing this, and this person's causing this drama in my life, and this person's causing this drama, and this situation's causing this, and I don't know, whatever things in your life that, as a woman, I realize there's so many things in my life that bring me anxiety, and it's just not side situation. It's people around me that demand things of me and try to control my life and try to plan and scheme and do this, and just, there's a lot of things in our life that just seem to want to take our peace, and God is like, God is in control, and he says, ask of me. I want to share this testimony of, says, ask of me and I will give you the nations. I never thought at that age when I asked the Lord that he would take me before the nations, and not just the United Nations, but before, one of the other amazing testimonies I've shared is, recently I was also on Iranian TV, but God has taken me before very secular channels. One of them is Iranian channels like BBC Farsi and VOA Persia, and I was on one recently, a couple weeks ago, or probably last week, and I've been able to share to millions. At some point, there was over, close to 50 million or something listening, as I got to share about Jesus Christ, and so I would have never thought, but it came with two things. It's an ask, and the cross. This is not the way I would have wanted it. This is not the way I would have wanted to reach the nations. I would have wanted it in a more easy way. I would not have wanted, I remember Saeed telling me God's going to use our life to reach millions of Muslims for Christ, and I was like, really? Are you not kind of a little, like, I don't know, big-headed or something? Like, really, our life, how God's... And then when I was in front of millions of Iranians on live TV sharing about Christ, I was like, oh, okay, this is the way God has. He's in prison. I get to see his picture. I was bawling on one of the interviews. I was just holding back tears because they were showing his picture. And I was like, this is how the gospel is being preached to the nations, especially to millions of Iranians, that was the desire of Said, but this is not the way we would have wanted it. And so you ask of God for the nations, and here it even talks about, Jesus Christ, and there was a heavy price for him to pay there was a heavy price. He had to go on the cross. So we want the resurrection feeling. We want that resurrected, victorious life, but we don't want to experience the cross. And so I felt led to also talk about that. When you ask for the nations and you ask for God to use you for the nations, you have to be ready for the cross. And actually, that's our calling. If you're not carrying the cross already, it's Jesus says you're not really following him. And so for a lot of us, carrying the cross would be, well, I live in California. What does that really mean? I'm not really being persecuted for my faith. I'm not really being, tortured or beaten like the 21. We see things on TV, but then we see so many other things, and it just kind of, okay, move on, next thing, But there's things in your life that require you, that God is allowing in your life, so that you can carry your cross and can have an intimacy with Christ because of that cross. There's people and situations in your life that you wake up to every morning and it hasn't changed, and maybe a loved one that's sick, maybe a financial situation, maybe a work situation, whatever it is, you wake up to it and it's there, and it's like a thorn in your side. And the Lord is teaching you to die to yourself and to love. And that's your training ground. And that's through that the Lord is getting you on your knees, broken before him. I've never felt so broken before the Lord and so intimate with him as I have in the last few years. Through that thing that you want gone in your life, Lord, just fix this, bring Saeed out of Iranian prison. Through that very thing, you're being broken and you're being taken before the throne of God. And now is your opportunity to ask. And beginning of January, this is another ask I had of the Lord. Beginning of January, I was so exhausted, 2 years of just traveling all the time, and I just felt the Lord just saying, slow down and do a Daniel fast. I've never heard of the Daniel fast. I'd heard people doing a Daniel fast, never done it, never really knew the details of it, but I think it's Daniel 10 where it talks about Daniel wanted more revelation of something of God, and he fasts from pleasurable things. So I fasted from chocolate, beginning of January, chocolate and coffee. I've never ever in my life fasted from coffee before. I've done liquid fast, and I've always had my coffee was part of that liquid fast. I made sure that was all. I don't have to eat food, but I need my coffee. And so I just felt like the Lord say, just focus on me. And so I started the fast, and I started sharing it on my Facebook, and I said, I don't know, I feel like there's going to be a breakthrough. I don't know what it is, but can you fast with me, pray and fast with me, just from pleasurable things, cut something out in your life for 21 days and focus on the Lord. So I did that, and I sought the Lord, and I would go to God's presence and start wanting to pray for Saeed's release, and the Lord was like, fix your heart. You put your focus on different things. And it was the first few days, it was just every time I'd go to God's presence, it was prayer of repentance. And the Lord was just like, repent. Your heart has gone stray again. And I've realized every single day I have to bring my heart back to the Lord. There's something that keeps it stray. Like my eyes keep going after this and after that, and the world pulls me at different directions, and my hope starts being put in this person and that situation, and every day I have to be like, oops, sorry, Lord, I put my eyes on that thing, on that person, on that situation, and they failed me, of course, and I'm a wreck. And so the first few days of the fast was just realizing how many times I drift my eyes off of the Lord, and every day I have to recalibrate it back to the Lord. or else my sinful, fallen nature will lead me down a very dark path if I don't recalibrate back to the Lord every day. And so that was the first few days, and then after that, again, every time I wanted to pray for Said, and people were like, "Why aren't you praying for Said?" Because I was sharing all of it on Facebook and Twitter, and I said, "I don't know. Every time I go, the next after the repentance, the Lord was leading me to just worship me. Just worship me. I'm a good God. Just worship me." And so after that, it was just like, just worshiping God and praising God and just for his goodness, for what he's done. And then just focusing on the Lord. And 2 weeks into it, people start messaging me, "Did you know the President of the United States is coming to Boise, Idaho?" I'm like, okay, someone has done some research. No standing president has ever visited Boise, Idaho. Someone told me they looked it up. And the funny thing is, you have like certain jokes between you and the Lord. I hate traveling, and I've traveled so many times to Washington, D.C. to see the president, and had Congress like calling them, and at least a phone call. I've been like, he's made calls to other people, like the athlete who came out and said I was gay. If he's being brave for standing up for his belief, then why aren't you calling me? If Saeed's being brave standing up for his belief in the Iranian prison, why isn't the president calling me? I was just one call or something. I'd gone all the way to, and I hate that. I hate the East Coast trip. I feel like I'm going to Europe. It just kills me. And I've traveled so many times there, and the Lord, through prayer and fasting, brought the president to Boise. And this is, for me, a lot of you don't know the backstory. For me, that was a miracle because I know one of the top number one priorities of this administration is to make the nuclear deal with Iran. And I know they are trying everything to not get Iran upset and to have this talk and come to a discussion, have good results with the nuclear talks. And I know from talks that I've had with high officials that Saeed gets on Iranian government's nerve because he's a convert, and as one of the high officials that I met in D.C. told me, he keeps we were talking, and it was interesting meeting. I heard a lot of our government officials say our positive thoughts are with you, and I was like, okay. And then I was told that your husband is making things very difficult. The Iranian government is very upset because they put him in Evin prison. He shared the gospel. They put him in murder ward of Rajai Shah prison. He shared the gospel. They put him in the political ward. He shared the gospel. They put him in the hospital. There's so many stories. He shared the gospel, and then he was beaten and taken back to prison. And I told our government official that, he's doing it as an act of love, not an act of defiance. And so, knowing that the Iranian government, I'm going to give you two of the testimonies, by the way. When they beat him and took him to the murder ward of Rajai Shah Hospital, or Rajai Shah prison, they put him in the murder and rapist ward. The head of that prison said if anyone finds out that Saeed is a convert, they will kill him. And they told Saeed's father, they said, your son will not be able to share Jesus in this ward. And what happened was some of these really one of the toughest murderers, started having dreams of Jesus. And so they came to Saeed. Saeed wasn't sharing. And they came to Saeed and they asked him, who's this Jesus? And he got to share with them, and they gave their hearts to Christ, and they start protecting him. And then that didn't work, so they moved him to another ward. And then the hospital, there's so many stories. His parents were there with him, but one of the stories is this very well-known judge and the lawyer. His wife was a lawyer. They're the ones that are persecuting Christians. They came in with, Saeed was in a private hospital, so all these people would come in with accidents and this, and Saeed would say, I'm a pastor, can I pray for you? Well, this judge that, is very well known, that, he's probably one of the judges that is persecuting Christians, his daughter had been in an accident, his 9-year-old daughter, and they were going to amputate her right leg. And what I heard from Saeed's parents was that Saeed just saw this little girl and he wept. He remembered his daughter, Rebecca. And he said, "Can I pray for her?" And I'm a pastor. And so he was in the hospital, went to her hospital room and just was praying and worshiping Jesus as this judge who persecutes Christian, and the lawyer that they can be like, "You're breaking this law, this law, this law," We're watching, and they were desperate. And the next day the doctors came to amputate her leg, and they said there's life up to the knee. And then again they waited, and there was life down to the ankle. And they had to, at the end, they had to amputate one little toe. And so all these stuff is happening. People are coming to know the Lord, and so that's what I told the government official. Now this is all the background about why it was so important I had met with the president. Now I know from the government, this administration, that the nuclear deal is so important. They're trying not to upset the Iranians, and Saeed is a big thorn on their side. He's bothering them, and if they talk about Saeed or a human rights issue, Iran shows allergic reaction to it, is what I was told. And they start like, they don't feel, every time his name's brought up or human rights issues are brought up, the Iranian government just throws a fit. So they want to make a nuclear deal. So the reason the president had been avoiding me for so long was it upsets the Iranians, and the nuclear deal is so important. And when I heard he was coming to Boise, I was like, really? He gave his, it was a miracle. For 2 years to beg for even a phone call and travel and do all this, and then to be in my hometown, Boise, Idaho, not having to make a trip, and for the first time, a standing president is coming to Boise. After the State of the Union speech. It was like Boise, Kansas City, or something like that, and then India. And I was, he wasn't really giving a tour of the country. It was just Boise and then some random city, and then he went to India. And so it was just, the Lord was like, there's so much power when you're on your knees. The Lord brought the president 2 weeks into the prayer and fasting. When I heard he was coming to Boise, the White House hadn't contacted me. People are like, "Oh, he's coming to see you. Why would he come to Boise, Idaho?" And I was thinking, he's coming to a city that has the most advocates for Saeed. I mean, there was people with banners, "Save Saeed, Free Saeed." People were chanting. It was just, and all the media, I guess the Secret Service watches all the media leading up to the visit, and it was all about, the president's coming to Boise. Is he going to see Naghmeh Abedini? It was just all over the media, every channel, everything. That week of the president visiting Boise and his visit with me had reached 600 million people across the world. It was what is it? There's like a media, people that watch all the stuff going on. So there was like 600 million people talking about the president coming to Boise to meet with me, and or reading about it on all the medias. So the Secret Service is watching the media. All the media is talking in Boise and Idaho is talking about the president coming to Boise. Why is he coming to Boise? Is he going to meet with Naghmeh Abedini? He better be meeting with Naghmeh Abedini. And then wrote him a letter and asked to meet with him. And I did 3 days leading up to his visit. I did a Esther fast where I just stopped eating, and it just started, and I couldn't have coffee because I was still in the middle of my Daniel fast. So I was like, I stopped eating, and so I could only have water. Anyway, so it was and some juice, so I stopped eating, and I was just like, like Esther, asking for favor to go before the king. I'm going to ask God to do this for me. And on my 3rd day of prayer and fasting, the Esther fast, in the middle of my Daniel fast, I got a call from the White House and said the president wants to meet with you. And then they sent me an email, and it said meet and greet. And so a lot of my lawyers, ACLJ lawyers, were probably like, "Oh, he's probably going to come shake your hand and it's going to be over with." And I was like, okay, I have a few minutes to talk to him, a few seconds. What should I say? And I was just praying. I had no idea. And then as we get there, it's actually a meeting. It's, he's just sitting there. He comes in. We're in a little office. right before he goes on stage to speak at Boise State University, there's like a professor's office, and it's pretty small. My son was kind of playing with the office chair of that desk, and it was a couch, and I'm sitting here, my daughter's sitting here, my son's sitting there, and the president and my son had brought the office chair, at the desk where it twirls around, has the wheels. He brought it right next to the couch where we were like playing. He was on the chair, and so when the president walked in, that's the only chair that's open. So he sits right here, and we're like here. He's in my face, and it's just like we can sense each other's breathing. It was so close, and so he's just sitting. And anyways, it was, long story short, it was a good meeting. The Lord just really led on what should be said, and it was a long meeting. There was nothing there for me to know, but he wasn't in a hurry to go out. We're just talking, and at some point I told him that we were praying for him, and that as Christians we love him. We don't, because that was a surprise to him. He expected a lot of anger and hate from me, and so when I said that, he grabbed my hand, and I said, I don't know, is this? I don't know, because people were like, before he came in, my kids were kind of acting goofy, and like his top advisor was like, oh, it's okay, they're kids, but they can't do that when the president walks in. And I was like, so what are you supposed to say? And always say, Mr. President. And I was just like, and people were telling me, don't just say Obama, you have to say Mr. President, or this and that, and then so when I was just like myself, and the whole room went silent. He had two people sitting there. One of them was his top advisor. And I said, when I said that as Christians, we did love him, we did pray for him, there was just silence. Because the first few minutes, he was just like, this is what we're doing, this is how we're trying to get Said out. And then he was expecting anger, and what are you doing, my husband's, and then when the love came, he was just like, there was just silence. And then I said, did I say something wrong? Was this not professional for me to say to the President of the United States? And they laughed, and he grabbed my hand. He's like, no, I need it. I need your prayer. And then from there, it was just like, even his face was even closer to me. We're just like, and it was just, but it was a meeting. I told him, I said, this meeting was brought on by God. Because I knew they didn't want to have it because of the sensitivity of the nuclear talks. And I said it was through prayer and fasting that this happened. And it's interesting, about I don't know, a week or maybe a few weeks later, he spoke at the prayer breakfast, and he quoted things that I'd said. Actually, Said had thanked him from a letter from prison, but he actually said at the prayer breakfast that it was interesting for the Christians around the world to see how God is in control of leaderships and countries through prayer and fasting. That's what he said at the prayer breakfast, that God is in control when Christians come together and pray and fast, He admitted to that, and so that's what I say, it's through prayer and fasting that God arranges meetings and things. And so when I was preparing for this talk, I feel like God was just like, tell my people to pray. How many times do you worry and the circumstances are dragging you down, and you forget that after I met with the president, I thought, for 2.5 years, I tried to meet with the President of the United States, and it happened. We get to talk to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. We get to talk to the God who has the king's hearts in his hands. I went to my daddy, I went to my king, and I said, I want to meet with the president. And he said, okay, let me bring him to Boise. You don't have to go to Washington, D.C. It's too hard. I don't want you getting tired. And, we have that access to God, and we don't use it. We try so hard to meet important people and government officials and presidents and celebrity, and we make idols of them, and they become so important in our life. But we have the most important access, and we have that to the King of Kings. And we tell our dad, we tell him the desires of our heart, and he's there listening, and he has all the power and control, and he has all the finances, like the United Nations, speaking before the United Nations. No money. Do you know how much, if I had a ministry how much money I've had to raise to get these doors opening before me in medias, and with no money, having people invite me, like when I'm going to the German parliament, it's not being done by a Christian group. A very liberal human rights group is paying my way. For God is not limited to money. He already has a master plan of how to save the world. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to. All he's looking for is for you to go to him in prayer. And if you want to be used by him, to be willing to pay a cost. But let me tell you, when you follow Christ, there is a heavy cost. But the most beautiful part of it is, Jesus said we will pay a cost of following him, and it will be painful. But the beautiful part of it is God says he will never leave us nor forsake us. I've never felt Jesus more in the last 2 years than I've felt my whole life. I've felt the intimacy I've felt with him. The reality of Jesus has become, I can't even explain it. He's closer to me than my closest friend, than Saeed was, than my kids are, than my parents are, than my mom is. And I just go to him and I talk to him, and I don't have to worry about all the storms and drama, and I have peace in the middle of the biggest storm in life. I'm not here saying this is what happened. This is still happening. My husband's still being tortured. He's still being beaten. He's still in an Iranian prison. I don't have peace because I'm telling a story of the past. I have peace in the midst of my trial. And that's the beauty of our Lord when we follow him, and willing to let go of our own ways and our own selfishness. And it starts with the family. It starts with people around you. I want to share this really quick story that my son has been into. I've shared this a lot of times, but it just clicked to me. Watching the Karate Kid made sense to me. So I hope it makes sense to you. My son has been in he loves Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and he was watching it, and I wanted him to start taking some classes, so he wanted karate classes. So we started getting into karate, and so we watched Karate Kid, different versions of it. But if you remember, the Karate Kid is this scrawny little kid who wants to be a champion, and he's being beaten up by all these big tough guys. Well, he goes to the master, and what does the master tell him to do? What moves does he teach him? Wax on, wax off. Day 1, day 2, up, down. And after days and days, I don't know, maybe a month or so, the kid's I'm done. This is not karate. You're just I'm slaving away. And you learn that the master was actually teaching him the actual moves he needed for the tournament, and he wins the tournament. So a lot of times in our Christian walk, we want to do big things for God. And we're why am I doing wax on, wax off? Why? And we want to be big missionaries and do big, but those are the moves. The everyday dying to yourself, the everyday getting up, loving that person when they're not being loving. Our culture tells us walk away, but Jesus says no, don't walk away. Our culture says do whatever it takes to make yourself happy, and we follow that leading. The Bible says there's 2 roads. One is a wide road that everyone follows, and it's our culture saying, do what makes you happy. Walk away from that relationship. You will be happy. Define your sexuality, and you will be happy. Take the life of this child, and you will be happy. You don't have to deal with it. You can finish your school. But you know what? My question is, has it made us happy? Or are we getting into a country that's more depressed, that's more anxious, that's more angry? Has it made us happy? Following our flesh? Has it really? We look at all the celebrities, and they have the looks, they have the body, they have the money. Are they happy? Why is there so much drama in their life? Why is there all this bipolar disorders? And the flesh lies to you. It says, this thing is hurting you. Get rid of it. And you do, and you're not happy. You walk from one relationship to another. You find your sexuality, you're still not happy. You get rid of this, I don't want to get too political, but, you take away life, and you think that would make me happy, but it doesn't. And your flesh tells you to do a certain thing, but in the end, it leads you to death. And the Bible says, carry your cross and follow me. Actually, die to yourself. I don't doubt that some people are born with certain tendencies. I'm born, I was from my amazing dad, I was given the tendency of anger from the lineage. My sister and brother are pretty mellow. I'm the more like tense, anxious, we all have tendencies because we're in a fallen nature. It could be a certain sexual tendency. It could be a certain other tendency towards drug abuse. It could be, I don't doubt that. I have certain tendencies. I have certain sins that I'm more prone to do than others. Those are the ones I watch. Those are the ones I go before the Lord and like, Lord, don't let me fall into this. I'm watching like a hawk. Like I know where my weakness is. Lord, help me. And so we're all in a fallen nature that is goes against God. And so in order to follow God, we have to crucify that fallen nature and those tendencies. And by grace of God, we're the only ones that have it. Religion says the do's and don'ts of religion don't give you the power to overcome the fallen nature. Get rid of it and let the resurrection of Christ live in you and the power of God live in you. And so as Christians, we have that power through Christ to die to our tendencies, to our fallen nature that tries to lead us into this life of despair and destruction. We have the power to crucify it. In Jesus Christ, we can go to Christ, get the power, crucify it, and live a resurrected life. That's just beautiful, and people can see, where is your God? I've had so many people, Muslims, atheists, agnostics, say, who's this Jesus? There's something about him. Because when we live, we don't even have to try so hard to evangelize. When we live the reality of Christ in our life, when we're living a crucified, we're dying to ourselves every day and giving life to those around us. You have two choices every day: to either kill those around you, say, well, I have to say this, I will have a heart attack if I don't. You have a choice to let it out and kill those who are around you. It's on my chest, I got to do it. Or you have a choice to kill yourself and your desires and give life to your family and those that are around you, and give them peace and give them grace and give them love. Because your flesh wants to say, throw up on them, you'll feel so much better, And so, this morning, I just want you to, I guess, I've been all over the place. That's why I'm not, my husband was the pastor, he was a Bible teacher. I studied pre-med. I'm not a Bible scholar or teacher. I'm not a politician. So I'm like, why am I even in the midst of these amazing teachers? And so that's why I just jump all over the place. I hope it made some sense to you. I feel like I'm an everyday person from Boise, Idaho. That's the beauty of God, putting me in Boise, Idaho, so that he can say, I made the president go to Boise, Idaho. If he would have come to Los Angeles, he would be like, oh, just Los Angeles or whatever. But just so that people can see my walk with the Lord and get motivated and be like, if she's just this everyday person, if she can go before nations with no money, no connection, she can go before presidents, then what's the difference? We have the same God. We have the same God. And he's looking for one person that's willing to say, you know what? If this pain is going to be with me for the rest of my life, but it's going to have me completely dependent on you, then so be it. I just want you, Jesus. When the 21 Christians were being martyred, I knew, you've heard of the 21 Christians that were martyred by ISIS, of course. I haven't seen the video, but someone who had said that one of the things they said was, Jesus, you're all we have. And I was thinking of them, and I was thinking of Stephen when he was being martyred, and his face was glowing. How can that be? And I was thinking of my own journey of pain, and I see so much peace that I'm shocked. I'm like, why am I peace? Why do I have so much peace? This is not normal. It's a peace beyond understanding. There's a time in your life where you're walking with the Lord, and there's such an intensity in your life that you can't even breathe, you can't even walk, and you're weak, like the 21 Christians, like Stephen. And that's when the Lord just cradles you, picks you up. And that's just where we want to be. It doesn't matter how much pain you have. It's just, God uses that pain to say, come to me. I can give you peace. Even if that situation that you want me to fix is fixed, you're going to have another thing, because this is a fallen world and you're in a fallen nature. I want you to learn to have so much peace and joy when everything's going wrong, and to praise me. And I want to take you before nations. I want to take you before governments. And the age doesn't matter. You could be so young and you could be so old, like Abraham and Moses, and it doesn't matter. God is not limited to where we live, how much money we have, how old we are, how we look. So it's just that one person that's like, you know what, Lord, if this is the wax on, wax off, and you're going to be teaching me for 10, 20, 50, 30, 40 years of my marriage or life or whatever, I will do it. I want to be used by you. I will not get rid of this thorn, get rid of this pain. I will allow you. If you want, Paul said, take this thorn from me, and God is like, my grace is sufficient. So if you want to take it, please. And Jesus even said, if it's your will, let this cup pass from me. So it's human. I go to God and say, if this is your will, I want this to be over with. I want my husband home right now. But at the same time, to be like, but Lord, I want your will. And if I'm going to be suffering for the rest of my life, but that means I'm into this, you're cradling me and you're loving me and I'm tasting you. And, I thought trials of life would make me doubt God, that they would make me question the goodness of God. But I've discovered the goodness of God. It's God's ways are not ours. It's so, I always feared I would question God's goodness. Something bad happened. But actually when something happens that's so hard and so painful, and you go to the presence of God, you discover his goodness and his beauty. And you're just like, oh, and your face is shining. You have so much peace and you have so much joy. And the thirsty, desperate world who's trying to discover the next thing, what makes me happy, what's going to make me whole, they look at you and say, you got it. What do you have? It's not the next diet. It's not the next book. It's not the next self-help. It's what is it? And it's Jesus. It's simple. And our life gets so complicated about different things and trying this and trying that. It's just Jesus. He has the king's heart in his hand. God has the king's hand in his heart. And he says, God invites you, he says, ask of me. I will give you the nations. You will shatter them. Those things that are bothering you, that are, why it starts with, why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? And God, if you read that whole chapter, but then God says in verse 9, you shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces. Ask of me. Just ask of me. You don't have to do a thing, but ask of me, and this is what will happen in your life. And so if anything from this talk I want you to take away is to just go into the presence of the Lord this day. Cut out a lot of the clutter in your life, a lot of the things. You know what? My kids, our culture gets us so busy of all the things our kids have to do in the classes and this. My kids don't do a tenth of what other kids do, but we spend time with the Lord, and I spend time with the Lord. Honestly, the last 2.5 years, if I don't spend hours at a day worshiping God and just reading scripture, that for me, scripture reading is the most peaceful thing. I just, like, when I'm getting anxious, I just start reading chapters and chapters and just going through the Bible. If I don't do that, I can't even stand up most mornings. I have my Bible app on my phone, and I wake up to it. I put it, I'm doing the 1-year Bible. I just have to hear scripture for a long time before I can even get up and stand up. And then at night, that's what I hear. Nights have been really hard for me because those were the times where me and my husband would spend time together. We'd put the kids to bed and the whole house is silent. And you're just like, oh, now what? Because I don't know how to, those were the hardest times for me because we'd watch a movie, we'd talk, we'd have coffee, we'd do something. And so the last 2.5 years, I've learned to spend hours and hours with the Lord and just pray and worship and read my Bible and just being in the presence of God. And not just because you have to, because you hunger for it. The reason for me, The reason I can do it is not because I'm like disciplined, because I'm not. But if I don't spend hours with the Lord, I'm a mess. I couldn't even stand up in front of you today if I didn't. God is using my weakness to show his strength, because I'm a very weak, anxious, depressed prone person. I am. Maybe it's because of where I was raised. My family, a lot of my family, including my mom, have dealt with some, severe depression and different things. And so I don't know if it's that, but I know who I am. I'm a very weak person that deals with anxiety and depression. But for me to be able to stand up and have so much joy and peace is because of Jesus, because of the reality of Jesus, And he wants that in your life. If anything from this, verse 7, I will declare the decree. The Lord has said to me, you are my daughter. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me. What is God telling you? Just come to me. Just come to me. All these nations planning and plotting and all this stuff around you happening. How many hours do you spend talking to each other about it, gossiping about it, talking about it in your mind, thinking about it, worrying about it? And how much time do you spend coming to me? Ask of me. I hold everything in my hand. That person, that situation doesn't. They're not the God of your life. They might seem to be trying to control your life, but they're not. God is bigger than them. So Jesus says, ask of me and I will give you the nations. So I want you to leave with this, that you can ask the same God, We serve the same God. And I believe as we're getting towards the end times, the church, Jesus is waking up his bride. Wake up. And we need to be lights. This world is in despair. There's kids and families that have come out of broken relationships. They're dealing with deep anxieties and depressions. They don't know what to do. We have the answer. The world is dying. They're shooting each other. Why? That person's hurting. When I see someone hurting another person, I feel for the person who's hurting them too, because so much anger and anxiousness, and you see the childhood, they're coming from separated homes, and I look at my kids go to a Christian school, but half of their parents are going through divorce, and those little babies, 6, 7-year-olds, are going through so much anxiety, and so the world needs needs our Jesus. Religion can't give them the peace. When your whole world's touring upside down, you're just going down this downward spiral, you don't go, oh, what's the do's and don'ts of religion? What do I need to do? It's just like, you need a relationship to just get you out and give you this peace that's beyond understanding. So, I want to leave with this. Go to him and ask of him. When your mind starts going of all the drama happening around you, all the people, instead of picking up the phone, instead of thinking about it, just go to God and cry out to him. Go to him before going to anyone else or before worrying about it so much. And when you go to him, you will see God move and trust him. Trust him in his ways. His ways are going to be different than your ways. It's going to require the cross. It's going to require a different path than you'd have anticipated. I'm thankful that I've been able to share the gospel in front of nations and presidents and governments, but this is not the way I would have chosen it. But I've had to submit to it and say, okay, Lord, I don't like, maybe if I was it was just me, it would have been easier. It's hard when your kids are hurting every single day for over 1,000 days. And they're in deep pain every day. They see dads and they long for their dad. I'm thankful because it has allowed me to understand other people's pains a little bit. Sometimes I feel like I just can't imagine the pain they're going through. Sometimes a lot of other people's pain seems so much bigger than mine, but my pain has allowed me to understand other people's pains. And as a mom, it's hard. But you know what? This is not the way I would have chosen it. But I submit to it. I get out on airplane if the Lord tells me. Another thing, I'm deathly afraid of airplanes. That's why it was funny that the Lord brought the president to Boise. But it's just, go to him, ask of him, and you will see in this last days where the world is so dark, we need to be shining. And the church needs to wake up, and the bride needs to be ready. And so in the last days, God is saying, wake up, come to me. Stop looking around to your culture. Stop looking around get your worth from those things around you. I will give you your self-worth. I will give you strength. I will give you peace. I will give you joy that the world can't give you and the world can't take away from you. And so ask of him, and he will give you the nations. We are his sons and daughters, and we have an inheritance, and we have an amazing God. Thank you. God bless you.